Did you know that LGBTQ plus characters aren't even present in 74% of the banned book titles from the first half of the school year? 92% don't include transgender characters. And what about this? 70% of the banned book titles don't even include characters of color and/or discussions of race or racism. If any of those statistics go against what you've heard in the mainstream media, stick around. But before we dive in, let's make sure we're all talking about the same thing. Books can be banned on a national level, in public libraries, in universities, and in K-12 schools. Thanks to the First Amendment, we don't need to worry about national book bans. According to the American Library Association, 51% of challenges, or book ban requests, take place in K-12 schools. 48% take place in public libraries, and 1% take place in universities. The book bans you hear about in the media primarily involve public taxpayer-funded K-12 schools, where members of the community are voting to remove certain books from the schools that they pay taxes to fund. Since those are the bans everyone's talking about, that's what we're going to cover today. And don't worry, we'll touch on state legislation too. But back to those numbers. While book bans have undeniably increased since 2020, the numbers presented by the media can be misleading. For instance, if the same book is banned in 10 different school districts, one of the most commonly cited sources, PEN America, counts that as 10 separate book bans. On top of that, again on a district level, if a book is banned in both a library and classroom, that counts as 2 book bans. Same book, 2 bans. That's why the media can report that there's been 1,477 banned books in the first half of the 2022-23 school year, when in reality, the number of unique book titles that have been banned is actually 40% lower, clocking in at 874. In fairness, PEN claims that both totals are likely higher due to books being reported from previous years, etc. But regardless, the discrepancy between the two metrics remains. Same fine print situation with the American Library Association. Pay attention. A lot of ALA numbers focus on demands to censor books, not the actual outcomes. But let's zero in on those PEN numbers a little bit more. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, there's 99,239 public schools spread out over 13,318 districts. In the first half of the 22-23 school year, 66 districts issued book bans. That's only 0.5% of all school districts. And since it's all over the news, let's take a look at Florida. During the same time period, PEN reports 357 book bans. But if you dig into the data, which I had to do manually because PEN does not publish this figure in their report, you'll find that the actual number of unique book titles banned is 34% lower, clocking in at 236. And those bans were only implemented in 13 districts. For reference, Florida has 74. So what about content? Why are books getting banned in public schools? That's where the media's mind games kick into overdrive, with sources like USA Today reporting that a, quote, escalating culture war is putting books centering, quote, racism, sexuality, and gender identity at risk in public schools and libraries. Where's that claim coming from? Directly from PEN, which writes, quote, overwhelmingly, book banners continue to target stories by and about people of color and LGBTQ+ individuals. However, the very next sentence, which discusses data, completely negates that description. Quote, in this 6-month period, 30% of the unique titles banned are books about race, racism, or feature characters of color, meaning 70% don't. Claiming those books are being overwhelmingly targeted is like saying 30% of the jury voted innocent, 70% of the jury voted guilty, and so we overwhelmingly found the defendant innocent. Like, what? PEN goes on to state, quote, meanwhile, 26% of unique titles banned have LGBTQ+ characters or themes. Same thing. How is 26% more overwhelming than the 74% of titles that don't contain LGBTQ+ characters or themes? Even if you wanted to throw both categories together, which seems arbitrary since one's dealing with sexuality and one's dealing with race, you can't just add 30 plus 26 because the categories aren't mutually exclusive. Nor, more importantly, are they reasons for the ban. You could have a book about an LGBTQ+ character of color that gets banned for its graphic depiction of violence, and PEN would place that book in all 3 categories. Because again, these are just categories that PEN developed to look at subject matter trends. They're not reasons for the ban. Another important nuance that often gets lost in the mainstream media is the existence of other subject matter categories. While PEN and the media stress that LGBTQ+ and minority content is being targeted, they gloss over the fact that of the 874 unique banned titles, 44% include themes of violence and abuse. 24% include depictions of sexual experiences between characters. 17% mention teen pregnancy, abortion, or sexual assault. And 38% include topics like bullying, suicide, and substance abuse. Because it's so important, I want to stress again, Penn's categories are not mutually exclusive, meaning the same book could fall into multiple categories. Also, Penn's categories are not reasons for book bans. They're simply groups that the organization developed to track subject matter trends. Categorizing exactly why books are banned in school districts requires a case-by-case analysis because there's an infinite number of reasons a community member could complain about a book. You then have to look into the decision-making process that guided the school board's decision. That's why articles like USA Today's "What are the most banned books and why" can't give you a straight answer on the why part. Instead, the media chooses to focus on cases where LGBTQ+ themes or characters of color are simply included in the books. But what about the rest of the content? Let's look at the most banned book of the year, Genderqueer, a memoir. The LA Times describes it as a book praised for its open and honest discussion of what it's like to be a non-binary person, noting that the book has been, quote, attacked for its frank depiction of sexual behavior. How frank? Well, on page 167, the graphic novel includes multiple images of oral sex, with the preceding dialogue focused on sex toys and the sharing of detailed sexual fantasies. Page 38 talks about the main character's daydreams about getting breast cancer so she'd have an excuse to remove her breasts. And discussions of exploring one's own personal body parts and fluids on page 62 is so graphic that our discussion on this channel regarding genderqueer is gonna have to stop there. With that information in mind, genderqueer has been banned from 15 school districts during the first half of the 22-23 school year, which I have to say seems like a shockingly low number. Now, do you think school board members banned that particular book because they hate non-binary people? Or do you think there's just the slightest possibility that they didn't want the subject matter we just discussed exposed to minors? Keep in mind, these are taxpayer-funded institutions. Nobody's banning the sale of Genderqueer. And for those who would point to the expense of having to buy the book, there's no national library ban. Parents can read Genderqueer to their children anytime they want. Before we wrap up, I'll list the top banned books in public schools this year. But first, let's address that legislation issue. Our state government's banning books in public schools. Once again, Florida's on everyone's mind, so let's start there. Florida's House Bill 1467 places the constitutional duty and responsibility to select and provide adequate instructional materials for all students on school districts. So no, the state government of Florida is not issuing lists of banned books. It's up to school boards to ban pornography in K-12 schools, along with content that is inappropriate for the grade level or age group for which the material is used. Same thing goes for Texas. Right now, there's a lot of talk about House Bill 900, which at the time of recording still hasn't passed into law. That bill outlines standards, including a prohibition on sexually explicit material, and then school districts will need to review books to comply. State governments are not issuing bans on specific books. And while Penn and the ALA may not track reasons for each specific book ban, the state of Florida does. Recent data shows that 87% of removed books were identified as pornographic, violent, or inappropriate for their grade level. Given the media's claims that books discussing race are being targeted in public schools, now would probably be a good time to point out that in 2022, Governor DeSantis of Florida signed House Bill 7, which actually expands curriculum surrounding African American history and specifically allows for curriculum that discusses, quote, sexism, slavery, racial oppression, racial segregation, and racial discrimination. The bill gained a bad rap in the press for also requiring that curriculum teach that, quote, no person is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously, solely by virtue of his or her race or sex. The pushback is confusing, to say the least, considering it's a pretty straightforward pledge to not judge or assign characteristics to someone based solely on their sex or race, which would seem like the perfect anti-sexism, anti-racism lesson in practice. Now, up until this point, we've been talking about K-12 schools, books predominantly distributed to minors through taxpayer-funded institutions, which is a completely different story than national bans, which I think we can all agree is a much scarier, less acceptable concept. Which is why the media is able to tap into that fear surrounding the phrase banned books. However, the same people who say they want to protect your access to books often work behind the scenes to restrict access. For instance, in 2021, over 600 publishing professionals signed a letter stating that, quote, no one who incited, suborned, instigated, or otherwise supported the events of January 6th should have their philosophies, quote, disseminated through our beloved publishing houses, and that they would do, quote, whatever is in our power to stop it. There's also been a movement to literally rewrite books that certain groups of people don't like, which again is arguably a larger issue since we're no longer talking about controlling the context in which minors access content, but instead the national distribution of literature. For instance, classics like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Matilda have been edited to include, quote, more inclusive language. To bring it all home, are requests to ban books on the rise? Absolutely. Are cumulative bans, which remember are school district level and include title and classroom library redundancy, on the rise? You betcha. According to Penn, cumulative bans are up 28% over the last 6-month period. But can it all be blamed on racist, homophobic Republicans? Based on everything we just discussed, I vote no. But if you're still on the fence, I strongly recommend you check out the following books. According to Penn, these are the top banned books in the first half of the 2022-23 school year. Genderqueer, a memoir. Flamer. Tricks. The Handmaid's Tale, the graphic novel. Crank. Sold. Push. A Court of Mist and Fury. This Book is Gay. The Bluest Eye. Milk and Honey. As a reminder, don't judge a book by its cover. For instance, while it's easy to assume that This Book is Gay is banned because of its homosexual content, maybe school board members took offense to the book's graphic, I just want to stress again, graphic instruction on how to perform multiple sex acts. Keep in mind, we're talking about literature distributed to minors in taxpayer-funded institutions. Now, if you still disagree with these books being banned, that's completely fine. In fact, on quickconservative.com, I've linked Penn's complaint page, where you can report book bans or challenges that you disagree with. My goal today in sharing this information is to just make sure we're all operating with the same set of facts. That, when presented with those facts, two different people might arrive at two different opinions is the hallmark of democracy. But we need to be careful that the media isn't segregating us into two angry groups based on political motivation, broad numbers, and vague claims. It's my personal belief that if every American actually read the books that are being debated, we'd find that we're really not that divided after all. Sure, we might still disagree on certain books or the degrees of age level content, but there's no way we're as far apart from each other as the media would have us believe. As always, all sources are cited on quickconservative.com. And if you learned something new, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it if you consider subscribing, following, liking, sharing. I try to put a ton of research into every post, and you guys are the only way it gets out there. So thank you so much for tuning in, and follow Quick Conservative for more quick conservative answers to common political questions.